Hey everyone, it's Sydney. So I'm here to talk about deity worship. Um, Essentially, to talking about how to work with deity, how to understand deity, and how to get closer to a deity if you feel like you're being called on. So I thought I would start this kind of like segment for these kind of talks and call it Deity Reflections. And essentially, I'll just kind of sit down and go over like my experiences with deity. But first, I thought we'd kind of like talk about more of how do you work with a deity? How do you know it is a deity? How do you like get in contact or make a connection that you know this is absolutely a deity calling and not, a random trickster spirit or some kind of like servitor or anything like that. So, first off, we'll get into the actual definition of deity. And deity, essentially, in a polytheistic religion, would be kind of like Wicca, or anything under the paganism, like branches, essentially, would essentially be a god or a goddess. So, with my background as a witch, I have more connection to Wicca. So, a lot of times you'll hear about people talking about their matron deity or their patron deity. Patron usually being more masculine, and matron usually being more feminine. So, also, too, because I'm more of a person who, like, essentially in my spiral path, I wasn't looking to work with a deity. I didn't know how to work with a deity. And I felt as though my path just kind of led me to the gods, if you as you will, as you do. So my initial experience, I won't say I was like called upon a deity, but at least when I was like kind of starting my practice a couple years back, I was essentially more pulled by the Egyptian gods, but I didn't really know how to go about it. So, my number one thing of like getting me on the path technically was more iconography and more symbology. So, per the Egyptian pantheon, you'll have any deity like Anubis, Isis, Osiris, Geb, Sekhmet, you know what I mean? So I was doing my research at the time, essentially, kind of like the group I was a part of. I was basically learning how to find information about a deity. And we just at the time were a little bit more goddess focused. So essentially, what I did is, per the time, I was with somebody who had a cat. And I always kind of wanted a cat, didn't really put it out to the universe of when or how that would happen. I just knew like when I'm like completely living on my own, I would love to have my own cat. So the person I was with at the time had a cat, and I kind of was interested in Bast. So I feel like a lot of people talk about Bast because I feel like she's probably the most familiar deity. Like she's like a deity that most people I feel would, anyone would come across. Kind of like if you really have like a connection with like protection or like how to guard other people like Anubis or with any form of like death, essentially you would come across like Anubis or like Bast. So I'll kind of show you this right here. This is essentially what helped me. So per my research, I was basically learning about how she is like a protectress of women and children. She's big when it comes to protection. She's also connected with a lot of like kind of more feminine aspects than anything. Like she's like the purr of a cat. She's kind of like the snuggle curled up in a ball kind of cat. She's the playful aspect of the goddess in this pantheon. So I'm showing you this figurine, this statue that I bought. I'll say this: when the gods call me, they call me big. So I was with my partner at the time, and we were going around in a Ross Dress for Less, literally. And they came up to me and they found this, and they were like, "Are you gonna buy it?" And I was like, hell yeah, I'm definitely gonna buy it. So I ended up taking this baby home for the good $13. I just thought it was wild too, because it's, it's not a bronze statue, but it's just like, why would a Ross Dress for Less be carrying this? I don't know. I really don't know. That's why I say when the gods call me, like when, in my experience, when they call me, they tend to come out right. Okay, so this used to sit on our dining room table a lot of times, and I would just kind of show reference to her. And this was my first interaction with like a deity outside of like cards or divination or anything like that. So for me, this was how I worked with deity. Not all of you will want to work with deity with a statue because, statues are pricey sometimes. Sometimes you just want to get to like the nitty gritty of doing the work, as I say. And sometimes you want to do something maybe quick and easy. Well, in my experience with working with the deity, that won't always be the case. I say this because when it comes to deity worship, or I say also to working with a deity, because just in my opinion, when it comes to worshiping a deity, it's nothing wrong. I don't feel like there's anything wrong with that. But I also feel like there's nothing wrong with seeing it as this is how you like revere them. This is how you bring back their spirit. Because there's a lot of deities out there that a lot of people don't know about. These are like the lesser known gods a lot of times. Bast is not one, but there are other deities out there that don't have iconography or don't have a well-renowned imagery that people can find, or a lot of information. You may only find an excerpt of information when it comes to a deity in general. So research would definitely be your first thing to do. I think I was just kind of pulled by the gods to do the work of research, because this was not my only interaction with working with Egyptian deities and finding information out about them. I remember going to a half-price books here in town, and I ended up finding this book called Feast of Light. This is by Normandi Ellis, and she also was a writer when it came to like Dreams of Isis. I didn't even know she even lived in my state in the Midwest. You know what I mean? Like, she's well renowned, and a lot of people say she definitely has like Isis energy. So before I even knew that, though, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm sorry, guys. But I end up finding this book at a half price, at half price books. And this just kind of gave me an overview of like deities. And Feast of Light is also celebrations of the season of life. And it doesn't just give essentially just the goddess, it gives like the entire mythology. We have literally the season of inundation, we have the season of sowing, we have like the Feast of Maat, the Knot of Isis, like all these well-renowned like understandings of ways to learn what these specific holidays are in reverence to these gods. The season of harvest, the Epigamenal days, like this is all the tea right here. Okay, so I'll tell you too, this was also one of my like witchy kind of introduction books in a way, because working with this pantheon is a lot different than like just kind of learning about Wicca overall. So it was through that I also had this deck come up to me, and if you guys have seen me in the lives with Jasmine Ambrosia, you'll know that we pulled cards recently in a live using this Isis Oracle. This is a beautiful deck. This is honestly the deck that really got me into the craft, essentially, because it was kind of like understanding and working with her and learning more about who she is as a goddess. So essentially, I started with Bast and now it was here. So here is like the book. Essentially, it's by Alana Fairchild, as a lot of you may have known or may have bought this oracle before, but it's one of my favorite oracle decks. It's filled with all forms of invocations when working with the oracle deck. There are rituals, which kind of got me more into ceremonial magic. And it also, it does have affirmations. Like, I don't want to say it's not love and light, but there are a lot of rituals in here that are very powerful and that can be used in your work when learning about a deity. Like I said, not everyone is pulled to a deity that is, well renowned, or that everybody has information on, or there are books and books about these deities. But what you can at least do is, if you don't have like an oracle deck, you can also draw this deity. You can also meditate and understand what this deity looks like to you, because sometimes that energy is going to translate differently to other people. Now, I will say, like, if it's Isis, I feel like you'll know, because you may see a lot of feathers. You may see a lot of like honey and rose petals. Like, those are some of the things that you can give to her as offerings. That's another thing too. If you feel like this is a deity calling you, it's best to kind of answer the phone, essentially. Okay, so like, how do you know a deity is calling you? Well, if you don't have the experiences like I did of, of like seeing this deity, getting like a full statue, finding books that just kind of come to you when you're in a half price books or used bookstore, then it's more going to be in this research that you find the symbology. The symbology is important because, like, Isis's name is essentially like of the throne, right? So a lot of imagery of her does have her wearing this crown above her head, and it has like a solar disc in the middle of it, meaning she's a little bit more of like a solar deity. Now, she does work also with moons. She is like connected to the moon, in my opinion, but per this like pantheon in general, you're going to see more solar depictions when it comes to her. Kind of same thing with Bast. Ever since I like worked with Bast for that time, I just kind of pay homage to her, and I keep getting like other things happen. Like 2 weeks after I got this statue, I was given a black cat, just out of nowhere. My partner gave this cat to me, and that's my cat Luna, and she just is literally the epitome of play. She is the epitome of like playfulness and fun and kind of petty at times, but it's in a way that I understand it, that this is kind of what Bast wanted to show me. I'm also an artist and graphic designer too, and a lot of people were telling me that they really loved like the color changes and the color choices I was making in my artwork at the time, because I was playing around, kind of like Bast, playing around with more aspects of color, like being more open, maybe opening more of my heart chakra, maybe opening more of my third eye to see these things more clearly. So I would definitely do your research when it comes to offerings. And I will also say correspondences. Correspondences are really big, I feel like, when it comes to deity and working with deity, because you won't really understand the deity until you have the mythology. For me and my practice, like when I work with a deity, I have to know their mythology, because that's their story to tell. Okay, so like with Isis, a lot of her story was like losing her husband Osiris, her husband brother, and how his body was essentially chopped up into multiple pieces and placed into the sarcophagus. Like, he pretty much laid himself in the trap that was set of the god of chaos. And per my like experience, I ended up having like more of an experience like her, where I went through great loss. This is how I kind of connected with Isis in a way that I never thought I would, was because I lost love, I lost a relationship, I lost someone very close to me, and it just kind of triggered this set of events where I felt like I was literally crying the tears that like Isis did in her mythology of losing Osiris, because in that mythology she's essentially talking, well, not talking, but she's essentially mourning the loss of him and looks all over to find him, and has to pretty much disguise herself as an older woman, kind of like shifting, kind of magical, kind of a maiden mother crone kind of vibe, where you're like shifting from mother to crone to essentially disguise yourself as an older woman. That's her mythology. And finding Osiris, kind of, the story is kind of hard for me to remember, but a lot of it is like him getting lost at sea and him essentially dying and then him becoming the Lord of the Dead. And that was kind of like how I connected, because I had lost somebody, I had lost, you know, someone close to me, that like I kind of felt like I was learning how to mourn through her mythology. And rereading those passages just kind of like made me feel as though this is how I'm connecting to her. This is how she's connecting with me. I've also had other experiences with Isis, at least, and a lot of that was like understanding more of myself and coming out from the ashes, using the Merkaba, or like the magic essentially, to bring her husband back from the dead. And in my situation that didn't work out as well, but you know, that's kind of what you learn how to let go. Sometimes too, when it comes to working with deities, sometimes you have to let go and let the gods. Now, I will also say, when working with a deity, sometimes you can, at least for me in my experience, I can't speak for anybody else, but I feel as though sometimes you will get very connected to the mythos to where you do go through that. You'd still go through that emotion from understanding them. Now, Isis isn't the only deity that I've tried working with or have like built a connection to, but I will say that was the most prolific. I will also say too that like I was given a statue of her, so I kind of always look to her. I keep her close to me. I always like revere her whenever I talk about like my story of coming out of the broom closet, essentially. I always feel like she kind of like pushed her wings and wrapped them around me so that I knew that like, hey, this is a thing. This is who you really are. And this is how you need to like find yourself in this life, is that you have to accept this word. You have to accept that this is who you really are. And I think there is an actual card in the Isis Oracle that's like kind of stand in your own power and stay true. So I felt like I was embodying that energy. Correspondences for her a lot of times are cows and sows, especially since she has like the horns above her head, being the indication of like throne, of like royalty. I think that's kind of how it connects with the sow, but also too, that's the milk, that's the honey, that's like the softness of Isis, like is this kind of mothering creature or animal to essentially give back to the world. Kind of like in the Norse pantheon, running on a tangent here, sorry guys, but like in the Norse pantheon, you have Adhamla. Adhamla is essentially like this primordial force that looks essentially like a cow that, you know, has to create the nurture energy in that space for Ymir, the frost giant, to essentially drink from her udder. And that tends to create the world of that pantheon. Again, tangent, sorry guys. But yeah, like you'll find a lot of like, not all mother goddesses, but I noticed like a mother goddess like Isis tends to have more of that energy, that nurturing Empress card energy. That's another way too. If you're kind of weird about working with deity, you could just work with the tarot. So you could essentially get your tarot deck and find maybe more of an archetype way to work with that deity. If you don't want to call it by its name, then maybe you should read more into the mythos to find what that energy looks like. At least for me, sometimes Isis is kind of like a Queen of Pentacles or a Queen of Wands. So you could literally use like a depiction of a deity. And if you feel like this is kind of the suit or energy that they represent, somebody like a Queen of Wands is more passionate and more ever flowing and putting more of their passion into you. You know what I mean? They're kind of like lighting the fire under your ass, essentially. And they're also teaching you how to be creative and sensual and open yourself up to creating these new endeavors in your life. That's kind of like the energy I feel like Isis gave me. So you could work with this. For other deities I've worked with or have a fond love of, you know, sometimes we are lucky to get books. Like I said, like there's books on Hecate, there's books on the Morrigan, you know, but sometimes with the Morrigan, I also have like a raven statue that's just for when I talk to her or leave an offering for her. There's also Freya. Freya's been really big with me essentially because I teach the runes class. So I work with her a lot differently than I do these other deities, because I feel like I'm literally learning and teaching, not the work of Seder, but like the work of learning how to teach the ways of magic and the ways of tradition and divination to people. So I feel like working with Freya, at least for me, has been prolific in my studying of the runes, you know. And then there are some books that I have that are basically on multiple goddesses. This is a goddess alive. So this one is literally on ways to work with Celtic and Norse goddesses, and you can work with them during the sabbats. So it'll literally be from like from Imbolc to Yule, or you could work with them with the moon phases, like the waxing, the full and waning moons. You could work with the deities through this kind of book too. But overall, guys, when it comes to working with a deity, it really just depends on this deity. To know that you're being called upon by a deity, you have to do your research. And if you feel like you're already going down a certain path, let's say, you know, you're going into Norse mythology and you've been picking up runes or anything like that, you can call on Freya. Now, when it comes to working with a deity, that's like a whole other video I'll probably do. But in general, if you feel called to work with one, you should answer the call when you're ready. You don't have to answer the call just because they called you. You could just find more about them, you know, leave a tea light, leave some incense as an offering, and you could work with that deity for the next 30 days. You could work with them for the next moon cycle, and just committing yourself to understanding them more so you understand what it's like when they call you. So all in all, guys, that's really all I wanted to bring to the table for you. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you have any more things you want to hear from me, you know, comment down below, and like and subscribe for this video. You know, share it and let people know that I'm here in the craft talking about the occult. Hope you all have a great day. Bye.